the last time I was on this clip, I was talking about like academic reasons why, at the very least, my theory should be investigated. I'm going to get back to that, but first I'm going to go into biblical reasons and other reasons why I could be correct. All right. Again, what my theory entails is that on the day of Christ, when he was born, I believe that the earth stopped revolving around the sun but kept rotating on its axis for a day. And I believe the same thing happened when he was in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. All right? Now we're going to go, again, we'll start with biblical support. Okay? We're going to now look at the life of Jesus in a chronological fashion, and whenever the word sign is there, you'll see how it fits in. All right? So number one, the very first time in a chronological basis where the word sign appears is when Jesus was born. There was two different, the apostle St. Luke said one thing and the St. Matthew said something else. St. Luke talked about the shepherds, St. Matthew talked about the magi. All right? Here is a quote from St. Luke. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This shall be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger. That was the sign for the shepherds to find who the child was. It'll be that specific event. You're going to find a child in a manger. Right? And if you look at the story of the Magi, there isn't technically the word sign there, but if you read it in Matthew, he goes by and he says, you know, the Magi were probably astrologers from Persia, and they went to see King Herod, said, we're looking for the child, and they said, well, when you find him, tell me, so I want to worship him too. Anyway, it was a ruse because Herod was going to kill the child. But anyway, the Magi, their sign was to follow the star that appeared very brightly, and if I'm correct, and it lines up with Dr. David Hughes' theory. By the way, I said he was an astrophysicist. I guess technically he's an astronomer. But anyway, what his theory said, the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction was moving, and then it stood still, or the other way to say it, it rested over the place where the child lay. So if you look at it, you've got the child in both instances, and the sign was not only the bright star that appeared, but it stood over the place where the child lay, or where the child was. It rested over, so it stopped. And if my theory is correct, that's what would have happened. Because like I said, if we stopped, if those two planets were in a conjunction at the time, and symbolically speaking, it could represent the nation of Israel, a king being born to the Jewish people, and because it took place in Pisces, it was the dawning of a new age. So that's the very first time the word sign. If you follow Jesus, there's a sign when he was born. Again, the shepherds would have seen the sign as it refers to the child itself. The Magi would have seen the sign as it was in the sky. It wasn't stated, but when it stopped, that's where they knew where the child was. So that was the sign. Advance. The second time the word sign appears in the life of Jesus in a chronological fashion, it took place on the day of his presentation. 8 days after being born, all male children had to go to the temple for the presentation in front of God in the temple. All right? And Mother Mary had to cleanse herself because she just gave birth, and her and Joseph brought the child in. Now there's many people that was in the temple. It was a very popular place. But two people in particular, as soon as they saw Mother Mary with Jesus, they recognized him for who he was. One was a lady called Anna, and the other one was an elderly gentleman called Simeon. And Simeon made several prophecies. When he saw, Lord, you can dismiss your servant now. I have seen the child. And one of the prophecies was, or two of them right off the bat, he said this child is destined for the rise and fall of many in Israel, and for a sign that shall be contradicted. Now I have to tell you a little story about that. On and off for the past almost 50 years, I've been trying to get this investigated, right? And when I sent it to scientific organizations, again, it goes against the laws of physics. It came up with it. If I sent it to religious groups, I would get letters back when they did respond that Jesus died for my sins, his blood has made me clean, whatever, right? None of them investigated it. So I put put the notes I had in my drawer. 10 or 12 years would pass, I'd find them again. Okay, I'll try it this time. Well, sometime in the 1990s, I was taking correspondence classes, you know, and then I said to myself, well, maybe I can find a Christian group that sends correspondence classes, and if it's about science, and the guy's got a PhD, maybe he'll investigate. So that's what I did. I signed up for a course. It was called Science from the Christian Perspective. And the gentleman running the course had a PhD behind his name. So I took the classes, 3 or 4 of them right away. Then I asked his permission if I could send him a theory of mine, thinking that, well, if he's got a PhD and he agrees with me, maybe he'll help me investigate this once and for all. So he said, yes, send it to me. So I listed as many academic reasons as I could come up with. But I led the letter with that statement from Simeon. You can read it in the Bible, what he said, you know, the whole statement. But I did mention the whole thing in that one part about the rise and fall of many from Israel. This child is destined for the rise and fall of many in Israel, and for a sign that shall be contradicted. All right? So after I did that, I mailed it out on Monday, and the following Tuesday I got it back. I goes, what is this? He didn't read this? And that's exactly what he wrote. He said, first of all, he was upset that I spelled Israel wrong. I guess I spelled it Israel. He didn't like that. And I've seen it spelled both ways, but he was upset about it. But what he was really upset about was when I said that the sign shall be contradicted. He was angry about that. In fact, he wrote back, it does not say contradicted, it said opposed or spoken against. Therefore, if you're already wrong on 2 points in your theory, I'm not going to read the rest of it. And he sent it back to me. And I don't know what the heck he was talking about, but if you check my Bible, it's over there. If you check my Bible, it does say for a sign that shall be contradicted. I got a New Testament book for my confirmation way back when. I opened that up, it said for a sign that shall be contradicted. I goes, what the heck is he talking about? I go to the computer, and it does say his versions as well. It was spoken against or opposed. Okay? Now, spoken against and opposed kind of match, but contradicted could have a far deeper connotation to it. So, here's one example of contradictions, how the sign will be contradicted. Use this as an example. In the year 2000, Al Gore should have been president of the United States of America, but it was contradicted. That means the truth of the matter did not come out. Right? He should have been president. It wasn't negated. He should have been president, but it didn't come to light. So that's the same thing what could have happened with my theory regarding the sign of Jonah. Most Christians believe that the sign of Jonah was the resurrection. If that happened, it was opposed, yes, spoken against, but the event happened. They can't accept that something might have happened when he was in the tomb. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Something did happen when he was in the tomb. I think it happened. It should be investigated. And if I'm right, again, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But, like I said, the word did say contradicted. Now let's go move up a little bit more in the life of Jesus. This episode does not have the word sign, but it's very close to it. You'll see what I mean. When Jesus was being baptized, right, by John the Baptist, you can check it out in the New Testament. John the Baptist said, you know what, when he met him, they were cousins, they probably haven't seen each other for 30 years, whatever it was. And he said, you should be baptizing me. And Jesus goes, just do what you're supposed to do, okay, please. And John the Baptist baptized him. And according to that account in the New Testament, a dove alighted over the head of Jesus. And then the voice came from God, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. The dove was there to signify who he was. Signify is a derivative of the word sign. Okay, so the sign was a dove, a dove over the head of Jesus when he was baptized. Again, you can connect that with the word sign. Fast forward again. Now you have Jesus in his public life. And of course the Jews wanted to know, there was false messiahs before Jesus. There was false messiahs after Jesus. So you can't blame the Jews. They're going, okay, look, you're not what we expected, but if you're the guy, would you show us something? Show it. Prove it to us. Just tell us. And here's a quote from Mark 8-12. After they asked for a sign, quote, and sighing deeply in spirit, Jesus said, why does this generation demand a sign? Amen, I say to you, a sign will not be given to this generation. Mark 8, verse 12. So Jesus said that no sign will be given to this generation. However, the next time it came up, if you read it in the book of Luke and Matthew, the following takes place. An evil and adulterous generation asketh for a sign, and no sign shall be given them but one. Just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so too will the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, I don't know about you, but if Jesus made 2 separate statements, what did he do? I think he contradicted himself. The reason why he contradicted himself is because he was saying, if I'm right, the sign of Jonah will be contradicted. It will, like I just said, explaining that thing with Al Gore. It fits perfectly. Now, there you got 2 separate statements. Okay, now I said this is going to be a biblical thing, support, but I'd like to say one thing about what Nostradamus said. Whether you agree with, I personally think he can predict the future far more accurately than even his best supporters give him credit for. And here's his quatrain. It's not in the regular centuries. It appeared in a letter, I think it appeared in a letter from the King of France or to his son, something like that. But I got this quote like way back in the 90s. All right? Now, the quote said, the quatrain said, quote, the 3 brothers have died, and the evil one controls all. Then is a sign, a dove amidst heaven's stars, and the time for the sun is high. By the way, it's sun, S-O-N. So if you look at that quatrain, first of all, he says, then is a sign. Well, if I'm right, there was a sign of Jonah then, and if it is detected and brought to light, then it is revealed. A sign amidst heaven's stars. I told you I need an astrophysicist or an Archaeo-Astronomer to check this out. He's going to have to check heaven's stars to see if I'm right. Okay? That fits in perfectly. The time for the sun is high. Well, what other sun are we waiting for if you're a Christian? So that almost says that the sign of Jonah has to be detected before anything else can happen down the road. So where does the word dove fit in? Well, there was that time when he was in the New Testament, he was baptized, and a dove alighted over his head. That could signify who he was. But that doesn't connect with the sign of Jonah. I said, how does this connect with the sign of Jonah? Then I said, wait a minute. I wonder what Jonah means when you translate it from the Hebrew or Aramaic into English. And it means dove. So is it possible, even Nostradamus could say, and I don't care what the Vatican said, their opinion about him. The same Vatican that condemned Galileo, right? I mean, for having the audacity to state that the earth revolves around the sun and proving it. Then they put him under house arrest. So anyway, that's more support that I could be right. Whether you want to consider it or not, I can't control that. So you look at it right now. Sign at his birth, right, could fit my theory. What Simeon said about a sign that shall be contradicted fits my theory. What Jesus said when he contradicted himself regarding the sign fits my theory. And the sign of Jonah fits my theory. So all those fit my theory. Now we're going to go back into the Old Testament, okay? If you look back in the Old Testament, the way I see it, there are three possible times where the whole earth could have been affected by God. One, the 3 days of darkness during the time of Moses, one of the plagues that befell Egypt. Was it 3 days of darkness over Egypt, or was it 3 days of darkness on that side of the world? I don't know. But symbolically speaking, it could fit the 3 days and 3 nights that Jesus was in the tomb. All right, that's one. Flash forward, what would be the next event? Well, it would be the long day of Joshua. If you look what Joshua, in the book of Joshua, Joshua 10 and 11, the Israelites were fighting a group of people called the Amorites. I'm going to condense this. And then Joshua, he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand now still over Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed. Then later on it says, just a little bit later, it says, "And the sun stood still for almost a full day." If that event would have happened, it would have affected the earth. There's no way around it. I mean, the sun and the moon stopping, whether it happened symbolically or in reality, I can't prove it if it happened in reality, but symbolically, Joshua said that. What's the next story? Besides the story of Jonah, what's the next story do we have? Well, there's a story about King Hezekiah. Now, King Hezekiah was the king of the Jews. And if you remember correctly, when Jesus was crucified, one of the statements that was said, there was a placard over his head that said, "Jesus, King of the Jews," or words to that effect. The anagram of those words in Greek spell out the word fish. That's why the word fish, the symbol of the fish, was the early symbol for Christianity. But there was a statement over his head saying, "Here is the Jesus, King of the Jews." Now let's go through the King Hezekiah story. Okay? King of the Jews, by the way. He was dying. He knew it. And he wanted to have an extension on his life. So he summoned the prophet Isaiah to him. Right? And all the prophets in the Old Testament were well known. So he summoned Isaiah to him, and he said, "Look, if at all possible, can God grant me 15 more years of life?" And Isaiah looked at him and he said, "No, that's not going to happen. Get your house in order. That's it. You're going to die." So King Hezekiah was depressed before. He became even more depressed, and he turned his face to the wall. Isaiah then was leaving, and I think he got out of the palace. As he's walking out, suddenly he goes back in and he tells King Hezekiah, "God will give you the extension of 15 years. So King Hezekiah is going, "What is this? First you said no extension. Now you say there'll be an extension. Like, which one am I supposed to believe in here?" You notice there was a contradiction there, just out of curiosity? Anyway, Isaiah said, "Well, God knows you were going to say that. So you see that sundial over there? You have the choice. God will do this. You can have it move back 10 degrees, or you can have it move forward 10 degrees. So King Hezekiah thought about it, and he said, "You know what? It's going to be harder for God to move it forward 10 degrees, so that's what I want." And it happened. Then you have 3 days later, King Hezekiah was restored. He felt better. He went to the temple and thanked God for what he did. Now look at the elements of that story. You have the King of the Jews and the King of the Jews, right? Jesus, King Hezekiah. You have a prophet. In one case you have the Son of God. In the other one you have a prophet of God. And there's a contradictory statement. With Jesus, no sign. Then he said, there'll be one sign. Here's Isaiah saying, no extension. Oh, by the way, there will be an extension. The word sign is there. There's 3 days there. And after 3 days, in the King Hezekiah story, there's a restoration. In the story of Jesus, there is a resurrection. It matches. So, like I said, could something have happened when Jesus was in the tomb? That, again, nobody noticed. right? It is possible. If you look at the biblical support I just gave you, more reasons why my theory should be investigated. Now, there's other stuff I was going to go back in the academic reasons too. Right here, I left the last segment that I was on there with the calculations of how many days we'd lose due to lag. And for now, I did it backwards the other time. I went backwards from Pope Gregory's assessment. You got to remember, he was dealing with a March 11th, first day of spring, and he had to adjust it. So here you go, moving forward. From March 25th, where is it? Okay, let's say no mistakes made. March 25th, first day of spring. 45 BC, go 128 years. You would end up with a March 12th, first day of spring in 1609. Go back 45 BC, go with 129 days. You'd have a March 12th, first day of spring in 1622. If you go back March 12th, from 130 years, you would get to 1635. There'd be a March 12th. And you got to remember, it's going from the 12th to the 11th now. And here's the big one. If you go by 133 years, you get a March 12th, first day of spring in 1674. So what I'm trying to say here is no matter what calculation going forward or backwards, it doesn't line up correctly. Now, if you go from March 22nd and move forward, you know, you will see that it could fit. And I don't have it with me. Anyway, if you want to see the charts, you can check it up on that. Like I said in the last time, JFK assassination forum, off topic, and it's the only topic that leads in with Jesus. If you want to have a topic there, I mean a discussion there, I got everything listed there as far as the lags are concerned. Okay, and the equations back. But it doesn't line up. To me, if you go from March 22nd, starting sometime during the crucifixion period, you can line it up. It's in the chart there. Now, well, this is a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. That's okay. Just in closing, I really don't have anything new to add, right? So I gave you my academic reasons. I gave you my biblical reasons. I can give you more reasons from Nostradamus, but one thing I learned about that is if you talk to the academics, yeah, okay, Nostradamus, yeah, this guy's a nut. If I talk to the Christians, they're not going to accept it, right? So I just let one. I just had used one, but there's other suggestions that Nostradamus could have predicted this event. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. Okay, you can go on the JFK assassination forum, and we can have a discussion there. But I really think this should be investigated. If you look at my former clip, okay, the one that preceded the one that was just done a couple days ago, there's another theory I have, and I think both of them coincide. One is with the lady clothed with the sun, and the other one, this other one, will be the sign of Jonah. If I'm correct, both of them will happen. I don't know which one will happen first, but if I'm correct, both of them will happen. Like if I hit this on the head. Now, the way I want to end it is one of the things I said in that video. All right. There was a movie way back when called The Boston Strangler, based on a real story about the Boston Strangler. Tony Curtis was in it, Henry Fonda, a lot of very good actors. And they were trying to catch the strangler, the police, right? So they narrowed down a guy who was in and out of mental institutions. And he was always out when the murders were committed. He was always in after they were committed, right? And then the police found drawings that I guess he wanted to be an artist, and he crossed out the exact number of victims that the strangler had killed at the time. So they called up, Henry Fonda was the district attorney of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Okay? So they said, we think we got him. Do we have your permission to arrest him? And he goes, you're not arresting anybody until I talk to him. Because if we got the wrong guy, this is going to look bad in the papers if he keeps on killing. So in the movie, and I guess it took place in reality too, he went down and talked to the guy. And after talking to him about for 10 minutes or something like that, Henry Fonda said, and I always liken this quote to the situation I'm in, gentlemen, I think we made a terrific landing in the wrong airport. Now, I think I made a terrific landing here. I just don't know what airport I'm in. So somebody's got to tell me, right? Did I land in the right airport? Is my theory? Oh, you can see there's a logic to it. I think it's at the very least should be investigated, right? If I landed in the right airport, that means I was right all along. Even going back, God knows how many years. If I'm in the wrong airport, then I was wrong all the way through. I'll accept that. There's nothing I can do about it. By the way, too, just in case I'm right, again, somebody, an Archaeo-Astronomer or an astrophysicist, has to tell me what airport I landed in. But the two people that I never forgot, that at least were polite to me, one was a gentleman from the U.S. Naval Observatory. I told you we had it. He was polite, and he said, look, I disagree with you. The planet could speed up and slow down on its own. Yeah, but if it speeds up 3 days, I mean, during the time, well, there's no connection with that to connecting it with Jesus. Back and forth, but he was nice. But the other gentleman, who, his name was DJ Lynn from California, I went to this is back in the 80s, and I got his address from somebody, and I sent him a book. And he read it, and it was my theory. And he was the only guy who encouraged me. He says, Dan, this is, Archaeo-Astronomy was getting big in those days. Dan, perhaps you should connect with a person, in Archaeo-Astronomy. They can tell if you're wrong. Keep it up. You might be right. Who knows? So I'd never forget that guy if I'm proven right. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry I wasted his time. I'm sorry I wasted your time. I'm sorry I wasted my time. But I hope this gets somebody out there, like an astrophysicist with an open mind, a Christian astrophysicist. Do you know anybody? Have them check this out. I think it's worthy of an investigation. Okay, so that's it. That's as much as I can do for today. If there's another section, I'll put it up. But as far as I know, I covered everything I was supposed to. Okay, now I'm just waiting for an answer. Hopefully an investigation, somebody does it, and says, Dan, this couldn't have happened because of this. Fine. If it didn't happen, fine. But if I'm right, I would like to know that too. Anyway, thank you very much.